According to traditional accounts, the Muslim conquests, Arabic, al-Ġazawāt or Arabic, al-Futūḥāt al-Islāmiyya, also referred to as the Islamic conquests or Arab conquests, began with the Islamic prophet Muhammad in the 7th century. He established a new unified polity in the Arabian Peninsula which under the subsequent Rashidun, the rightly guided caliphs, and Umayyad caliphates saw a century of rapid expansion of Muslim power. They grew well beyond the Arabian Peninsula in the form of a Muslim empire with an area of influence that stretched from the borders of China and the Indian subcontinent, across Central Asia, the Middle East, North Africa, Sicily, and the Iberian Peninsula, to the Pyrenees. Edward Gibbon writes in the History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, under the last of the Umayyad, the Arabian Empire extended 200 days' journey from east to west, from the confines of Tartary and India to the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. And if we retrench the sleeve of the robe, as it is styled by their writers, the long and narrow province of march of a caravan, we should vainly seek the indissoluble union and easy obedience that pervaded the government of Augustus and the Antonines. But the progress of Islam diffused over this ample space a general resemblance of manners and opinions. The language and laws of the Quran were studied with equal devotion at Samarkand and Seville. The Moor and the Indian embraced as countrymen and brothers in the pilgrimage of Mecca, and the Arabian language was adopted as the popular idiom in all the provinces to the westward of the Tigris. The Muslim conquests brought about the collapse of the Sassanid Empire and a great territorial loss for the Byzantine Empire. The reasons for the Muslim success are hard to reconstruct in hindsight, primarily because only fragmentary sources from the period have survived. Most historians agree that the Sassanid Persian and Byzantine Roman empires were militarily and economically exhausted from decades of fighting one another. The rapid fall of Visigothic Spain remains less easily explicable. Some Jews and Christians in the Sassanid Empire and Jews and Monophysites in Syria were dissatisfied and initially sometimes even welcomed the Muslim forces, largely because of religious conflict in both empires. In the case of Byzantine Egypt, Palestine and Syria, these lands had only a few years before being reacquired from the Persians, and had not been ruled by the Byzantines for over 25 years. Fred McGraw-Donner, however, suggests that formation of a state in the Arabian Peninsula and ideological, that is religious, coherence and mobilization was a primary reason why the Muslim armies in the space of 100 years were able to establish the largest pre-modern empire until that time. The estimates for the size of the Islamic Caliphate suggest it was more than 13 million square kilometers, 5 million square miles, making it larger than all current states except the Russian Federation. Frontier warfare continued in the form of cross-border raids between the Umayyads and the Byzantine Isaurian dynasty allied with the Khazars across Asia Minor. Byzantine naval dominance and Greek fire resulted in a major victory at the Battle of Acronon, 739, one of a series of military failures of the Caliph Hisham ibn Abd al-Malik across the empire that checked the expansion of the Umayyads and hastened their fall. In the reign of Yazdjurd III, the last Sassanid ruler of the Persian Empire, an Arab Muslim army secured the conquest of Persia after their decisive defeats of the Sassanid army at the Battle of Wala'a in 633 and Battle of al-Qadisiyah in 636. But the final military victory didn't come until 642 when the Persian army was defeated at the Battle of Nahawand. These victories brought Persia, modern Iran, Assyria, Ashuristan, and Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, and southeast Anatolia under Arab Muslim rule. Then, in 651, Yazdjurd III was murdered at Merv, ending the dynasty. His son Peroz II escaped through the Pamir Mountains in what is now Tajikistan and arrived in Tang, China. Following the first fitna, the Umayyads resumed the push to capture Sassanid lands and began to move towards the conquest of lands east and north of the plateau towards Greater Khorasan and the Silk Road along Transoxiana. Following the collapse of the Sassanids, these regions had fallen under the sway of local Iranian and Turkic tribes as well as the Tang dynasty. The conquest of Transoxiana, Mawara al-Nahr, was chiefly the work of Qutayb ibn Muslim, who between 705 and 715 expanded Muslim control over Sogdiana, Khwarezm and the Jaxartes Valley up to Fergana. Following Qutaybah's death in 715, local revolts and the defeats at the hands of the Chinese-sponsored Turgesh, chiefly the Day of First in 724 and the Battle of the Defile in 731, led to a gradual loss of the province. By 738, the Turgesh and their Sogdian allies were raiding Khorasan south of the Oxus. However, the murder of the Turgesh Khagan, Sulu, and the conciliatory policies of Nasruddin Sayyid towards the native population opened the way for a swift, albeit not total, restoration of Muslim control over Transoxiana in 739 to 741. Muslim control over the region was consolidated with the defeat of the armies of Tang China in the Battle of Tilas in 751. During the period of early Rajput supremacy in North and Northwest India, modern-day Pakistan, 7th century, the first Muslim invasions were carried out simultaneously with the expansion towards Central Asia. In 664, forces led by al-Muhallab ibn Abi Sufra began launching raids from Persia, striking Multan in the southern Punjab, in what is today Pakistan. In 711, an expedition led by Muhammad bin Qasim defeated Raja Dahir at what is now Hyderabad in Sindh, and established the Umayyad domination in the area. By 712, the west of Indian subcontinent was then divided into many states. Their relation between each other were very weak. Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, the ruler of Iraq, knew this and waited for the best moment to strike. As Muslim Empire and Dahir's kingdom were contiguous to each other, frequent border clashes took place. As a result, relation between the two got worse. The king of Ceylon, the present Sri Lanka, sent many 8 ships full of gifts for the Caliph al-Walid and the ruler of present Iraq, Hajjaj bin Yusuf. But the pirates plundered the ships at the Dabul of Sindh, which is now known as Karachi. Same pirates were also involved in plundering the innocent merchants and cities near the coast. A woman was also victim of those pirates' acts. In response to the letter sent by her to Hajjaj bin Yusuf in early 711 AD, he demanded to take action against pirates from Raja Dahir, but Raja Dahir denied to take responsibility for the crimes committed by the pirates. For all these reasons, Hajjaj bin Yusuf sent soldiers against Dahir, but first 2 expeditions failed. Then in 712 Hajjaj sent the 3rd expedition. The commander-in-chief of this expedition was Muhammad bin Qasim al-Thaqafi, the nephew and son-in-law of Hajjaj. Qasim subdued the whole of what is modern Pakistan, from Karachi to Multan. After his recall, however, the region devolved into the semi-independent states of Mansoura and Multan, ruled by local Muslim converts. The Arabs were effectively driven out after the defeats inflicted on them by the Gujara Pratiharas. The Emir of Sindh paid tribute to the Rashtrakuta king of southern India. Further Muslim conquests in India were halted after the defeat of Arabs in Battle of Rajasthan at the hands of Hindu kings. The conquest of the Iberian Peninsula and Septimania commenced when the Moors, Berbers, Arabs and Northwest Africans invaded Visigoth of Christian Iberia, modern Spain, Portugal, Andorra, Septimania, in the year 711. Under their Moorish leader, Tariq ibn Ziyad, they landed at Gibraltar on April 30 and worked their way northward. Tariq's forces were joined the next year by those of his superior, Musa bin Nusa. During the 8-year campaign, most of the Iberian Peninsula was brought under Islamic rule, save for small areas in the northwest, Asturias, Cantabria, and largely Basque regions in the western Pyrenees. This territory, under the Arab name al-Andalus, became first an emirate and then an independent Umayyad Caliphate, the Caliphate of Córdoba, after the overthrowing of the dynasty in Damascus by the Abbasids. When the Caliphate dissolved in 1031 due to the effects of the Fitna of al-Andalus, the territory split into small taifas, and gradually the Christian kingdoms started the reconquest up to 1492, when Granada, the last kingdom of al-Andalus, fell under the Catholic monarchs. After the conquest of Armenia, Muslim armies began to raid into the Caucasus, where they were confronted by the Qazis. Initial Muslim raids in the 640s and early 650s ended with the defeat of an Arab force led by Abdurrahman ibn Rabi'a outside the Qazi town of Balanjar. Hostilities broke out again in the 710s, with raids back and forth across the Caucasus but few decisive battles. The Qazis, led by a prince named Bajik, invaded northwestern Iran and defeated the Umayyad forces at Ardabil in 730, killing the Arab governor al-Jarrah al-Hakami and briefly occupying the town. The Arabs eventually drove them back into the Caucasus, killing Bajik. Arab armies led first by the Arab prince Maslama ibn Abd al-Malik and then by Marwan ibn Muhammad, later Caliph Marwan II, poured across the Caucasus and eventually, in 737, defeated a Qazi army led by Hazrat Arkan, briefly occupying Atil itself. The difficult terrain and hostile population made a permanent occupation impossible. The Arab armies withdrew and Qazi independence was reasserted. The frontier between the two groups eventually became static around Derbent. Although the Qazis would continue to raid Muslim territory, there were no more major battles. The success of the Bulgarian Empire and the Byzantine Empire in dispelling the Second Umayyad siege of Constantinople halted further conquests of Asia Minor. In 718, in 716 Khan Tervel signed an important agreement with Byzantium. During the siege of Constantinople in 717 to 718 he sent 50,000 troops to help the besieged city. In the decisive battle the Bulgarians massacred around 30,000 Arabs and Khan Tervel was called the savior of Europe by his contemporaries. After their success in overrunning the Iberian Peninsula, the Umayyads had moved northeast over the Pyrenees where they were defeated in 721 at the Battle of Toulouse and then at the Battle of Covadonga. A second invasion was stopped by the Frankish mayor of the palace Charles Martel at the Battle of Tours in 732 and then at the Battle of the River checking the Umayyad expansion at Narbonne. The Turgesh Khaganate, a Turkic dynasty of the 700s, saw significant initial success fighting against the Umayyads. In 717, the Kara Turgesh elected Suluk as their Khan. The new ruler moved his capital to Balasagun in the Chayi Valley, receiving the homage of several chieftains formerly bound to the service of Bilge Khan of the Turkut. Suluk acted as a bulwark against further Umayyad encroachment from the south. The Arabs had indeed become a major player in recent times, despite the fact that Islam had yet to make many converts in Central Asia. Suluk's aim was to reconquer all of Transoxiana from the Arab invaders. His series of conquests was paralleled to the west by the activity of the Qazi Empire. In 721 Turgesh forces, led by Kulkor, defeated the Caliph army commanded by Saad ibn Abdulaziz near Samarkand. Saad's successor, al-Qurashi, massacred Turks and Sogdian refugees in Qujand, causing an influx of refugees towards the Turgesh. In 724 Caliph Hisham sent a new governor to Khorasan, Muslim ibn Said, with orders to crush the Turks once and for all. Confronted by Suluk on the way, however, Muslim reached Samarkand with only a handful of survivors, and the Turgesh were enabled to raid freely. A string of subsequent appointees of Hisham were soundly defeated by Suluk, who in 728 even managed to take Bukhara and later on destroyed a large part of the Caliphate's army in Khorasan, discrediting Umayyad rule and maybe putting the foundations for the Abbasid revolution. The Turgesh state was at its apex of glory, controlling Sogdiana, the Fergana Valley. It was only in 732, that two powerful Arab expeditions to Samarkand managed, if with embarrassing losses, to re-establish Caliphal authority in the area. Suluk renounced his ambitions over Samarkand and abandoned Bukhara, withdrawing north. In 734 an early Abbasid follower, al-Harith ibn Zuraj, rose in revolt against Umayyad rule and took Balkh and the Marf before defecting to the Turgesh 3 years later. Defeated. In 738 Suluk, along with his allies Ibn Zuraj, Garak, a Sogdian leader, and men from Uzrashana, Tashkent and Kutal to launch a final offensive. He entered Jawzjan but was defeated by the Umayyad governor Asad at the Battle of Sanor-Karistan. In 738, The Umayyad armies were defeated by the Indian Hindu kings at the Battle of Rajasthan, checking the eastern expansion of the empire. In 740, the Berber revolt weakened Umayyad ability to launch any further expeditions and, after the Abbasid overthrow in 756 at Córdoba, a separate Arab state was established on the Iberian Peninsula, even as the Muhalibids were unable to keep Ifriqiya from political fragmentation. In the east, internal revolts and local dissent led to the downfall of the Umayyad dynasty. The Khariji and Zaydi revolts coupled with Mawli dissatisfaction as second-class citizens in respect to Arabs created the support base necessary for the Abbasid revolt in 748. The Abbasids were soon involved in numerous Shia revolts and the breakaway of Ifriqiya from the Caliph's authority completely in the case of the Idrisids and Rustamids and nominally under the Aghlabids, under whom Muslim rule was extended temporarily to Sicily and mainland Italy before being overrun by the competing Fatimids. The Abbasid Caliph, even as he competed for authority with the Fatimid Caliph, also had to devolve greater power to the increasing power of regional rulers. This began the process of fragmentation that soon gave rise to numerous local ruling dynasties who would contend for territory with each other and eventually establish kingdoms and empires and push the boundaries of the Muslim world on their own authority, giving rise to Mamluk and Turkic dynasties such as the Seljuks, Qizmishas and the Ayyubids who fought the Crusades, as well as the Ghaznavids and Ghurids who conquered India. In Iberia, Charles Martel's son, Pippin the Younger, retook Narbonne, and his grandson Charlemagne actually established the Marca Hispanica across the Pyrenees in part of what today is Catalonia, reconquering Girona in 785 and Barcelona in 801. This formed a permanent buffer zone against Muslims, with Frankish strongholds in Iberia, the Carolingian Empire Spanish marches, which became the basis, along with the King of Asturias for the Reconquista, spanning 700 years which after the fall of the Caliphate of Córdoba contested with both the successor Taifas as well as the African-based Muslim empires, such as the Almoravids and Almohads, until all of the Muslims were expelled from the Iberian Peninsula. Conquest of Nubia, 700 to 1606. After two attempts at military conquest of Nubia failed, see First Battle of Dongola, the Arab commander in Egypt concluded the first in a series of regularly renewed treaties known as al-Baqt, Pactum, with the Nubians. This governed the relations between the two peoples for more than 600 years. Thereafter Islam progressed peacefully in the area through intermarriages with Nubians and contact with Arab merchants and settlers. It should be noted that according to some Muslim sources the second invasion of Nubia by the Muslims was actually a victory which led to the al-Baqt Treaty. In one Muslim source the leader of the second invasion, Abdullah ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Sa'd, is actually called the conqueror of Nubia. In 1171 the Nubians invaded Egypt, but were defeated by the Muslim Ayyubids. From 1170 to 1173 the Muslim Ayyubids fought and defeated another Nubian invasion force from Maurya which had penetrated Egypt. This time the Muslim Ayyubids not only repelled the invasion, but actually conquered some parts of northern Nubia in retaliation. In the late 13th century the Muslim Sultan of Egypt, Sultan Baber, defeated and subjugated the kingdom of Nubia, Maurya. Sultan Baber made the kingdom of Nubia, Maurya, a vassal state of Egypt. Decades later in 1315 the Christian kingdom of Maurya was conquered by the Muslim Mamelukes, and a Muslim prince of Nubian royal blood was placed on the throne of Dongola as king. During the 15th century, the Funj, an indigenous people, appeared in southern Nubia and established the kingdom of Sinnar, also known as Sultana Azaka, the Blue Sultanate. The kingdom officially converted to Islam in 1523 and by 1606 it had supplanted the old Christian Nubian kingdom of Alwa, Alodia, and controlled an area spreading over the northern and central regions of modern-day Sudan, thereby becoming the first Islamic kingdom in Sudan. Their kingdom lasted until 1821. The Aghlabids, rulers of Ifriqiya under the Abbasids, using present-day Tunisia as their launching pad, conquered Palermo in 831, Messina in 842, Inna in 859, Syracuse in 878, Catania in 900 and the final Byzantine stronghold, the fortress of Taormina, in 902 setting up emirates in Sicily. In 846 the Aghlabids sacked Rome. Berber and Tulunid rebellions quickly led to the rise of the Fatimids taking over Aghlabid territory. The Kalbid dynasty administered the emirate of Sicily for the Fatimids by proxy from 948. By 1053 the dynasty died out in a dynastic struggle, and interference from the Berberids of Ifriqiya led to its breakdown into small fiefdoms which were captured by the Italo-Normans. By 1091, the Abbasid period saw initial expansion and the capture of Crete. 840, the Abbasids soon shifted their attention towards the east. During the later fragmentation of the Abbasid rule and the rise of their Shiite rivals the Fatimids and Bu'ayyids, a resurgent Byzantium recaptured Crete and Cilicia in 961, Cyprus in 965, and pushed into the Levant by 975. The Byzantines successfully contested with the Fatimids for influence in the region until the arrival of the Seljuk Turks, who first allied with the Abbasids and then ruled as the de facto rulers. In 1068 Alp-Arslan and allied Turkmen tribes recaptured many Abbasid lands and even invaded Byzantine regions, pushing further into eastern and central Anatolia after a major victory at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. The disintegration of the Seljuk dynasty, the first unified Turkic dynasty, resulted in the rise of subsequent, smaller, rival Turkic kingdoms such as the Danishmends, the Sultanate of Rum, and various Atabugs who contested the control of the region during the Crusades and incrementally expanded across Anatolia until the rise of the Ottoman Empire. After the Mongol Empire destroyed the Abbasid Caliphate, rampaged through most of the Muslim world following the Battle of Baghdad, 1258, they soon converted to Islam, beginning an era of Turkic and Mongol expansions of Muslim rule into Eastern Europe, Central Asia and India. Timur envisioned the restoration of the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. Unlike his predecessors, Timur was also a devout Muslim, as he converted after the conquest of Damascus, and referred to himself as the Sword of Islam. His armies were inclusively multi-ethnic and multicultural. During his lifetime Timur would emerge as the most powerful ruler in the Muslim world after defeating the formidable Mamluks of Egypt and Syria, the emerging Ottoman Empire and the declining Sultanate of Delhi. Timur had also decisively defeated the Knights Hospitaller at Smyrna and since then referred to himself as a Ghazi. By the end of his reign Timur had also gained complete suzerainty over all the remnants of the Chagatai Khanate, Ilkhanate, Golden Horde and even the Yuan Khanate. However, the remains of his massive empire would carve out three of the world's most powerful empires to pick up the ruins. The Ottoman Empire would fill up the power to the west of his empire, gradually taking up most of the Near East. The Safavids would occupy Persia and Central Asia, whilst a descendant of Tamerlane would invade Kabul and from here would carve out an empire stretching from the borders of Persia in the west to the Bay of Bengal in the east. This empire would be known later as the Mughal Empire. Decline and collapse, 1800 to 1924. The Safavid Empire ended with the death of its last ruler Ismail III, who ruled from 1750 until his death in 1760. The Mughal Empire struggled with exhausting wars with the Maratha, internal strife, corruption and revolts, and fractured after 1719. The remaining loyal Mughal territory shrank throughout the next century and a half at the hands of the expanding British Empire until it was finally absorbed into the British Raj in 1857. The last surviving Muslim empire, the Ottoman Empire, collapsed in 1918 at the hands of the British Empire and its allies, in the aftermath of World War I. On March 3, 1924, the institution of the Caliphate was abolished by President Mustafa Kemal Atatürk as part of his reforms in creating Turkey as a secular republic and a Turkish nation-state from the remnants of the collapsed Islamic multi-ethnic Ottoman realm. According to traditional accounts, the Muslim conquests, Arabic, al-Ġazawāt or Arabic, al-Futūḥāt al-Islāmiyya, also referred to as the Islamic conquests or Arab conquests, began with the Islamic prophet Muhammad in the 7th century. He established a new unified polity in the Arabian Peninsula which under the subsequent Rashidun, the rightly guided caliphs, and Umayyad caliphates saw a century of rapid expansion of Muslim power. They grew well beyond the Arabian Peninsula in the form of a Muslim empire with an area of influence that stretched from the borders of China and the Indian subcontinent, across Central Asia. Coherence and mobilization was a primary reason why the Muslim armies in the space of 100 years were able to establish the largest pre-modern empire until that time. The estimates for the size of the Islamic Caliphate suggest it was more than 13 million square kilometers, 5 million square miles, making it larger than all current states except the Russian Federation. Frontier warfare continued in the form of cross-border raids between the Umayyads and the Byzantine Isaurian dynasty allied with the Khazars across Asia Minor. Byzantine naval dominance and Greek fire resulted in a major victory at the Battle of Acronon, 739. Exhausted from decades of fighting one another, the rapid fall of Visigothic Spain remains less easily explicable. Some Jews and Christians in the Sassanid Empire and Jews and Monophysites in Syria were dissatisfied and initially sometimes even welcomed the Muslim forces, largely because of religious conflict in both empires. In the case of Byzantine Egypt, Palestine and Syria, these lands had only a few years before being reacquired from the Persians, and had not been ruled by the Byzantines for over 25 years. Fred McGraw-Donner, however, suggests that formation of a state in the Arabian Peninsula and ideological, that is religious, the Middle East, North Africa, Sicily, and the Iberian Peninsula, to the Pyrenees. Edward Gibbon writes in The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, under the last of the Umayyad, the Arabian Empire extended 200 days' journey from east to west, from the confines of Tartary and India to the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. And if we retrench the sleeve of the robe, as it is styled by their writers, the long and narrow province of march of a caravan, we should vainly seek the indissoluble union and easy obedience that pervaded the government of Augustus and the Antonines. But the progress of Islam diffused over this ample space a general resemblance of manners and opinions. The language and laws of the Quran were studied with equal devotion at Samarkand and Seville. The Moor and the Indian embraced as countrymen and brothers in the pilgrimage of Mecca, and the Arabian language was adopted as the popular idiom in all the provinces to the westward of the Tigris. The Muslim conquests brought about the collapse of the Sassanid Empire and a great territorial loss for the Byzantine Empire. The reasons for the Muslim success are hard to reconstruct in hindsight, primarily because only fragmentary sources from the period have survived. Most historians agree that the Sassanid Persian and Byzantine Roman empires were militarily and economically